Still Team Human with heart, empathy, and love. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Still Team Human. I'm your host, Francesca DeMeglio. This is where we discuss how to keep people at the center of our work, even in the age of AI and other advanced technologies. This is where we elevate the human and understand how people can ensure the new world fits around their best interests. And today, our guest is one of my favorite people from my days reporting on human resources, Cornelia Gamlem, best-selling author. Along with Barbara Mitchell, Cornelia wrote The Big Book of HR and other titles, including They Did What? Unbelievable Tales from the Workplace. Highly recommend this for your beach reading. It is a guilty pleasure that you will not feel any regret about reading. And she has had many years of experience in HR and working as a people leader. And today she is going to share with us. Welcome, Cornelia. How are you?
I am great, Francesca, and thank you for that wonderful intro. And yes, and for pitching, they did what? It is a great summer read. And I think it's an eye opener for a lot of people who've not really seen what goes on behind the curtain in HR.
It's true. And I'm going to leave a link to our conversation about it and my review of it in the show comments so people can check it out. It's a great one. So let's get started with our conversation, get right down to it. People are looking for purpose-driven experiences at work. We know this especially about Gen Z. What can leaders do to encourage staff members to find meaning in their work? And does AI, this artificial intelligence we're all dealing with now, does it help or hinder this search for meaning?
That is also true about looking for purpose in your work. Um, Oftentimes I think there's the misconception that people are looking to make money, they're looking to get ahead. And yes, we all need to make money in the work that we do. We need to support ourselves and pay for basic life requirements like food and housing and transportation. But I think beyond that, when we start talking about what people really want from work, and it's a question we don't spend enough time thinking about it. And I think leaders themselves don't spend enough time thinking about that because they've got so much on their plate, to be fair. Um, but one thing that I think leaders can do for their staff and for themselves as well, if they realize that they're part of the team, they just may have a slightly different role in the team. And I think that's what gets lost. But a really good thing to do is some self-reflection.
Mm.
And oftentimes we just get so busy, we don't take the time to do it. And that would be a great exercise to do even at work as part of a team meeting, or even if you do an offsite retreat, but to have people take the time to sit back and really think about, first of all, what's important to them as a human being. Where do they prioritize things? Because their job may not always be at the top. In fact, hopefully it's their family and taking care of themselves as well. I work I work with an organization. It's a nonprofit, and we're all volunteers. But there's one woman who she has really given a lot to this organization, and she's going through some health issues. She's looking at having an ankle replacement surgery in a few weeks, and everybody keeps asking her, "How are you doing?" And take the time to take care of yourself. The organization will continue chugging along without you while you're in this recuperation period, and that's such an important thing. We all have times when we have to sort of take, even if it's a half a step back and say, I can't give 100% or 110% right now because I've got other things going on in my life, or I've got to take care of family members who have things going on in their lives. So it's looking at what's important to you first as a human being, but then also what's important to you as a contributor to this organization.
Mm.
Because as you pointed out, people are really looking for something that's bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
They want to come into an organization. They want to make a meaningful contribution, or at least most people do. I mean, we all know those people that just want to come in and be absorbed with busyness and busy work. But where is it adding value? And I think most people really, really want that. How do I add value to this organization?
Um,
So some of the things they can do is map out, what their own interests are, whether they're work related or not, and what are some of the challenges that they've faced as well. And even if those interests and challenges are outside of what you come to work to do, you're still learning from them. And there's a lot of application that you can make from other organizations that you've been involved in, like volunteer work, as I just mentioned. So what is it that they find challenges them? How have they dealt with those challenges? Um, what other challenges do they want? Because a lot of times we take on challenges because we want to grow and stretch ourselves a little bit. So I think if they have something like that in mind, then it's easy when you sit down with your manager, for example, and start talking about the future and the path forward, that proverbial where do you see yourself in 5 years, which I hate that particular question, but it's where do you want the future to take you in terms of the work that you're doing
mhm.
and in terms of your own interests. So, um, and then I think they also need to get a good handle on what they think their strengths are. Uh, Not so much their weaknesses, but what are the things they want to avoid that they have no interest in? Um, instead of pushing somebody towards something that they don't want, where are their strengths? What are they good at? I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and she was talking about how she never had the desire to go into management, which so many people, in the corporate world and the organizational world would go like, what? I mean, that's the natural progression. But she was very, very good at what she did. She's a scientist and a chemist, and that's where she saw herself making the biggest contribution. So, you know, we often look at the individual contributors and say, huh? But they're the people that behind the scenes are often making the organization moving and moving in the right direction. So, I, doing those kinds of exercises and encouraging people to do that, yeah, and I mentioned starting it out perhaps as, a team event, even in something in a staff meeting, but encourage people to continue that exercise along the way. And it can really help a manager too down the road when they're looking at employee development, which is so important. And that's something else people want, especially the younger generations coming into the workplace. It's like if I'm not learning, if I'm not growing, I'm out of here. You don't have
True.
anything to offer me.
And it is a key to employee engagement, which has been suffering recently, according to all the statistics. So that is very important, helping
Yes,
them develop.
yeah, yeah. And that's another issue that's near and dear to Barbara and mine's heart is employee engagement. We've written a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you had also asked about AI and does it help or hinder it? I don't know so much that it hinders it unless somebody were to like go in, take some of those points I just made and sort of put it into AI. That's not going to be meaningful to you as an individual. Um, AI has no human emotions. AI has no situational awareness. It just takes the information that gets poured into it and sort of churns it out. To me, it's almost like making a cake or a recipe. You put all the ingredients in, if you do it right, you come out with the perfect dish, the perfect cake. But there's no thought or judgment in it. It's the person, it's the cook, it's the baker who's going, maybe I could put a little dash of this in as an extra. AI isn't going to tell you things like that. So it can't read things like trust. They can't read how a team works well together, or a deficit in team leadership. It doesn't know those things. And it also doesn't have really any understanding of the cultural history of your organization. And so I mean, I would say it, it can hinder the search if you're not, if you're relying on AI. I really don't see where it's going to help either. So I would say not a good area to consider AI.
Yeah, I agree with that. We at Still Team Human, I just wrote a blog about this, about the Human X Factor series that I'm working on. I had an edition about compassion, and I interviewed ChatGPT about this very topic, and it said basically, I even tested it a little by saying about some of the hard things I've been going through that most of the audience knows about. And I asked what it would do. And it said specifically, I will look for cues to give you the right language and say the right things to you, to try to lift your spirits. But I will not care what happens to you after this is done. And that is going to be the same thing if you're asking about gaining more meaning from your work and how to go about doing that. It might give you step-by-step instructions like like Cornelia and Barbara have done in their books, but it does not like give you that advice, the feeling, the thought, and the judgment like you have had put it before that you would get from a human being.
And you know, it's interesting that you say that because I'm sure you've heard it, I'm sure most of the audience has heard it, where in the mental health profession particularly, they're very, very concerned. I
I
heard this from somebody early on when we started getting bombarded with AI, people turning to AI for that kind of advice. And it's
yeah,
like, no, because it has no compassion, it has no empathy. It can't it has no emotions. So it
right.
can't really understand if somebody's talking about what they're going through and the effect it's having on them. It has no baseline for anything like that.
No, none at all. And in fact, there are cases being brought right now because people have committed suicide
Yes.
based on conversations with AI. And I, as a parent, there's all kinds of AI companion apps now for AI to be your friend or be your girlfriend or boyfriend. Terrible idea.
Yeah.
If we can prohibit that, we should be prohibiting that. There should
Yeah.
be laws around that. And even in the case of like having AI as a mentor, I think you could ask it basics about salary and benefits when you're considering jobs, but certainly not the advice you would get from a human being who has lived it, experienced it. We should say that. We all think that you should be talking to humans. So
Yeah.
that brings me to another question because one of the great parts about living and working with humans is that we can build community. How can leaders work to build community in their organization? And what makes a strong, thriving community? I don't think it's AI companions. That's for
I don't think so either. But I'm glad you asked that because, you know, building community, it gets back to the heart of the employee experience that is near and dear, to Barbara and mine's thought pattern, to our heart. In fact, we've written a little ebook on that as well. Um, but I think some of the things that a leader can do to build community in their organizations, first, they've got to inspire their staff. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing. And you know, if you can inspire people to do their best, to look at the organization as a whole and, you know, kind of help the organization to be its best, where they also see that their contribution is part of that success. Um, that's that's a great first step for any leader to do. You've got to be able to value each and every employee and their individual uniqueness. And, you know, we sometimes forget about that. And, you know, I could go walk down a path of diversity right now, but there are so many different facets to what makes each one of us unique. And that's our own personal diversity, you know, our backgrounds and the type of families that we were raised in and where we've lived, all of that has given us personal experiences that helps to shape us. So I think it's important for leaders to recognize that, but at the same time, don't lose sight of the team, that, you have a unique group of individuals, um, but they should all be welcomed into the team and set the standards that people can work together. I think uniqueness often gets lost. Um, I just heard from a client recently who said, "Well, we have a very diverse leadership team," and I wanted to say every leadership team is diverse, but I'll have
Right.
that conversation with her later.
Right.
Um, but while we're on that subject of diversity and, our own personal experiences, encourage people to share. And, it doesn't mean that people have to be talking about negative things that have happened to them, very personal things that they probably ought not be sharing in the workplace.
Right.
But sharing some of the experiences that they've had, again, whether they're work related or not, um, to give up, to give other people that perspective of what is my teammate like? What are they like as an individual? And that gets back to, is the leader inspiring this kind of behavior? But it also opens up the door to understanding different points of view. And that helps to make the team, the community, a whole lot better. Um, One of the other things that I think doesn't happen often enough is encouraging team members to acknowledge their peers. I mean, yes, we all want to have some acknowledgement from the top. You know, eh, People want to hear from their managers, you're doing a good job. They want to hear that in different ways. But I think when a peer turns around and comments on something positive that one of their team members did or how a team member helped them, that is so much more meaningful and positive to people than just the kind of the accolades that we tend to throw around and that tend to come from the top. And, and I can think of so many times where it's happened to me where I've gotten a personal handwritten note from someone. Um, and I can still remember some of the people who sent them to me. And they, I treasured them. I probably still have some of them, even among my moves. Um, but they're so much more important than things a like a certificate that people are going to stick in a drawer and never going to look at ever again. But to get something like that from a peer is even more meaningful. And just those informal shout outs, I think are perfect. The other thing, we talk a lot about, the get-togethers and the parties and, what, how does that help to build the community? Um, a lot of times I've seen organizations do that, and it's like, all right, did they really mean what they're doing? In fact, we were on a webinar a couple of months ago and somebody raised that very question. Well, yeah, they have the party and then afterwards all the leaders disappear. Well, what good has it done? But sometimes it's those informal events, that the things that sort of grow organically, the hey, let's go to lunch without planning it, or let's have Taco Tuesday lunch in the office and we'll, we'll order in or just things like that. It doesn't have to be big. I mean, it doesn't even have to involve ordering food in. It could just be an informal meeting where people sit around and maybe have some fun.
Yeah.
Do some kind of a fun activity, which always, I mean, that really helps to bring people together. But I think, what one of the last things that I'd like to touch on is those opportunities to collaborate. We need to have people realize that collaboration is so important for the health of an organization. I recently read, in fact, just the other day, something about um, what traits distinguish an inclusive leader. And it's funny because it was a lot of the things that I just talked about. And I always hook on to that word inclusive or inclusivity because Barbara and I firmly believe that that's the engagement in employee engagement, or employee engagement is the I in DEI. But, what they had talked about was, for a leader, first of all, to be committed to being inclusive and to make sure that they're visible in that and hold themselves accountable for it. Um, Having courage where they challenge assumptions, their own and the assumptions of others, but also being vulnerable when um, they make a mistake, acknowledge it, and not shying away from those difficult conversations, you know,
Yes.
tackling
You're
them head on.
you're right. You're
Yeah.
speaking my language. I couldn't agree more. And it is a real shame. We recently did a confessional podcast here where I talked about the merits of DEI and why we shouldn't abandon it in the way we have.
Hmm.
And a big part of it is the inclusion factor. If people feel included, they're going to be able to um, feel comfortable enough to talk, to say their piece, to brainstorm, to fail sometimes. It could lead to great things for your company. And as I've said many times, you mentioned having fun together and all of that. You also get to do a much more exciting job. It's more fun, it's more adventurous, it's more what you'd like to do. So I agree,
Yeah,
100%.
and we talk about DEI, and people think, it's a training program.
I know they don't get
It, it it's aligned with hiring, a more diverse workforce, whatever they think that that means, and it really isn't. And in this article that I read, I thought, oh, you're singing my song. I've been harping on some of these things for
yeah,
years, that
yeah,
it's something that's embedded in your leadership. And they had talked about, two of the other traits were curiosity and collaboration, which I think we've already touched on, but
yes.
then also cultural intelligence, understanding, working across different cultures, but also realizing that culture, it it doesn't just define where a country somebody came from, or their ethnicity. It's back to, there's cultures among many different kinds of groups. There's cultures within your accounting team, in your organization, and your procurement team. People are drawn to those different professions for different reasons, but recognizing that, and also recognizing your own personal biases, which I think is such it's so really, really important. But you had asked what makes a strong, thriving community. It's a lot of these things that we've just touched on. Having that interaction, having good discussions, having hard conversations, um, and talking about mistakes. I was at a meeting not too long ago, and somebody had brought up the historical perspective of something, and I had said that was really an interesting thing to know, because I had not been part of the organization for a long time. So it's helpful to know why certain decisions were made at a certain point in time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to work in the future, because situations change. But I had also brought up, we need to look at history, and in any organization, where did things go wrong and why? So we can do that lessons learned, and learn from some of our mistakes. And I think organizations that are willing to do that are going to thrive much more. And treat those mistakes as that they're not something that's necessarily negative, but there's an opportunity there. What can we learn? And
Right.
yeah, so it's a lot of the things we've already talked about.
Yeah, it's true. And it's also some of it is common sense or what humans seem to have known at one point and need reminders of always. Which brings me to the third question here. We have often heard that leaders need to acknowledge that people are their most valuable asset. And is valuing people as an asset in is that even a thing in our AI driven world? And how can leaders ensure that they don't lose sight of their people's contributions? That's my biggest fear, that the leaders are going to see these cheaper, more affordable way to get work done and forget about what people bring to the table. So what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to go back. I'm going to start with the AI piece and then probably return to that as we move on. Um, AI has no emotion, so it doesn't know how to value people. Um, so no, you can't depend on AI as a way to begin to value your team members and the people that make your organization successful. Uh, that's a human trait, and that's something that leaders need to do. I think what you're alluding to, and I think we will morph into that a little bit later, is this these quick decisions to say, let's be more productive, and we can use AI instead of hiring humans to do certain tasks in the organization without much thought. And it gets back to thought, judgment, some of my favorite words. Valuing people, the saying is kind of trite, people are our most important assets, but it's true. Um, People drive the success of your organization, whether you want to realize that or not. Even if you're depending on an AI model, somebody's developed that AI model. There is a person behind it. So I think we can't lose sight of that. It's how we use these models that's important. Um, you have to treat people as if they matter, their time, their contributions, and I think we have said this over and over again, and we'll continue to say that. That's first and foremost, is that they want to be recognized for who they are and for what they bring to the organization. Um, but another thing is paying people fairly, and there's a lot of intricacies in that as well. Um, but people have to be paid for the job that they are doing within the organization. And you have to, that's where I think AI gets in the way. You really need to understand what it is that the people do in order for you to put a price tag on
Right.
what that particular job or role is. And it's distinct from the person who's in the role. Because I've seen situations where somebody's in a role that they are so overqualified for. And managers come in and say, well, I want to pay them more because they have all of this other experience. Well, that may be true, but that isn't needed in this particular role. What you need to be doing as a manager is helping them to move into a better role that fits their needs and their backgrounds and what they can contribute to an organization. So, yeah, all of that goes into fair compensation, but I think it's important that organizations stay on top of that because people are going to pay attention to that. Seeking their input. People they want to be heard, even if they have an idea that seems a little bit far out, if you will. Take the time to at least listen to it and give them feedback and say, that's a good idea, but it probably doesn't make sense right now, maybe next year. I mean, I had a situation recently where, again, we were kind of brainstorming some ideas and somebody came up with something. And, I looked at him and I said, not now. I said, that's a great idea. But I said, for right now, we have an immediate need. We have to address this immediate need. But let's look at that perhaps as something that can get done next year when we've got the time to organize it and do it right. But a lot of times people, they will come to you with an idea. If you don't have the time or the resources to implement that idea or to even consider it, let them know, but don't shoot them down for it either. Don't say that's not going to work. Or we've done that before, that'll never work. Um, you need to recognize the talent that you have. And that kind of goes back to, my comments on paying somebody fairly. You've got somebody who's very talented. Why are they in a job that's that's not totally u utilizing what they
Mm,
can bring to the organization? Um, Timely and honest feedback is just so, so important. And, we often think of feedback as giving negative news, but it's giving positive news as well.
mhm,
But you've got to deliver it at a time when something happened or when you've noticed something, not waiting for the annual performance appraisal exercise when
mhm.
everybody's forgotten everything. And it's those little things that occur on a day-to-day basis that become important, not some grand project that they may have completed. Take the time to recognize people as you notice things and give them honest feedback. Uh, you know, um, Celebrate their successes. We kind of talked about that a little bit as a team, but I think that's something managers have to be very, very accountable for. Train people, teach people.
Mm,
People want to advance. And again, it's not just for the sake of money, but they want to utilize their talents. They want to learn and grow. We all want to learn and grow.
yes.
I mean that's just such an important thing. And when you're recognizing their talent and when you're teaching and training, that just ties into employee development. Develop their skills, develop their abilities. None of us walked into an organization and had the answers for everything. So you want to help them with that. And probably the most important, if Barbara could have joined us today, she would have taken up the whole time talking about practicing active listening. And
Um,
she always, she has a line that we have used so many times. When it comes to communication, we've all, if you've done any kind of college coursework or even, management development, you learn how to write, you learn how to make presentations, you learn how to do all of these other things, but there's no course in how to listen. And you've really got to practice active listening.
It's the truth. And I mean, and it takes a while to learn. I wrote about this topic for a couple of different publications. One was iVillage, where I wrote about marriage and being a newlywed, and another was for this kind of thing, professional. And it's all the same. Like you have to repeat back what the person said to you, and you almost never, I've done this test, you almost never say what they really said. So
Hmm.
it takes a long time to train yourself to really listen and then to understand what they meant, because sometimes what they said isn't exactly what they meant.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that is quite a skill and one most of us are lacking and
Yeah.
certainly no training for. So
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is the context in which a conversation takes place. I mean, if you're having a one-on-one conversation, you can be a little bit more focused. But I've been in situations where I'm at a meeting, like this group that I'm part of. We do a monthly membership meeting, and afterwards, there's a lot of activity. People are talking to each other. People are coming up and asking me questions. And there's somebody else who's standing over on the other side talking to you, and you think you've given a good answer to their question, and maybe you did, but they didn't hear it because of all of the other activity and the distractions that are going on. So
which is
yeah,
common at work.
yep, yep, yep. It really does. But that kind of gets into, where does AI fit into all of this? And you're just talking about, well, we've talked about emotions. At some point, we may be able to teach AI how to mimic emotions, but they don't feel it, that they don't possess
Right.
them. And as we know, when you're dealing with people, especially, it's a very black and white world. Um, Within AI, there's no gray area. And, part of the premise of that book that we wrote, They Did What, is to show that, yes, you find yourself in situations as either a manager or an HR professional where you're dealing with people, but it's not black and white. And it's knowing how to manage in that gray area that that really defines success when you're dealing with people. AI can just never replicate something like that.
Mm. It's
So, and you're trying to give feedback and conduct a performance management review. You can feed all the data you want into AI. Maybe it can give managers prompts, as you said earlier. You have a manager who's a little bit of an introvert that, I don't like dealing, I have to deal with people. What am I supposed to say? At least, you know, to that point. But you have to understand, as you said, what's the message you want to get across.
right.
And AI just cannot do that as effectively.
No, and most people see through it, right? Anyway,
Yeah, yeah, they will. Yeah,
realize right away anyway.
yeah,
So you have to be an authentic human.
exactly. Well, you had mentioned earlier something about all the spam, and I think
Yes.
everybody's getting spammy emails about all of these wonderful things that I'm going to be able to do for you, and you just look at it and go, "This is AI generated,"
That's
It's
right.
so obvious. Yeah, yeah.
It's true. It's true. Um, and that kind of brings me to the next question about how can leaders effectively use empathy, the feeling that people have, to help their employees cope with the issues facing people today? Certainly, there's the economy, these political divisions, lots of job insecurities, this 24-hour news cycle that can be downright depressing, constant rumors about things that may or may not happen. That happens especially at the workplace. And then there is AI, which is adding this complexity to the work. What do you have to say about all of that?
Yeah, there's so much today. There's just so much going on in the world. And AI, I think, is just adding to the stress of that. I mean, let's talk about
I
employee
agree with that.
stress for a couple of minutes. Even take AI a little slightly out of that equation. You've got the economy. Employees are concerned about the health of their organization, which translates to their financial health. Am I going to get laid off? It just again take AI out of it for a minute, but if the economy isn't doing well, a company's going to cut back, and where is that going to leave me? So that's a feeling of stress that people have, and it's a very real feeling of stress. Then you add to it all of the talk around AI. AI is going to replace jobs, whether it is or not is yet to be seen. But I think if you were to just pick up a paper or just talk to somebody casually and bring up the topic of AI, that always bubbles up. People are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Maybe yes, maybe no. It's not a given. So I think, first of all, for a leader, you've got to recognize that we do live in stressful times for all of the reasons that you just spoke about, the economy, politics, insecurity, the news cycle, which makes everybody crazy.
Yeah.
And then all of the rumors. Um, it gets back to understanding your people, taking the time to understand them as a human being. Understand what they may be going through.
Mhm. I think also we mentioned this in the Human X Factor series. The empathy that they build is so vital. That's why it's so vital. And building those strong communities, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
Continue. I interrupted you.
yeah. Um, I think a lot of times managers themselves don't understand all the resources that they have available and resources that are available to their employees.
Mhm.
Things like your training resources.
Mhm.
If people are concerned about what's next for me, what's my future going to look like, how are you going to develop your people? What's available to you as a manager to help your people get trained and developed? dealing with people's personal problems. It's something as a manager you do not want to take on yourself. You're not, you don't have the qualifications that a trained therapist might have. Um, that's why organizations have EAPs. Understand how your EAP works. So many managers don't know. Understand how to make a referral to the EAP. I mean, somebody could just come to you and say, "Hey, I'm having a bad time. All of this stuff is going on in my life." You're not the person as a manager to be sitting down listening to this. Yeah, yes, you can certainly lend that empathetic ear, but beyond that, the best thing you can do is to say, have you thought about calling the EAP? You
Hmm.
can make a self-referral, even if their job isn't suffering at that point in time, make a referral to an EAP. You can talk to somebody that that can listen, but also has the skills to understand and perhaps give you some more resources rather than trying to muddle through it as a manager or even as an HR professional. So I think those are some of the things that as a leader, you can let the person know you hear them. You
Hmm.
you have feelings for what they're going through, but you can't solve their problems directly.
So true. Oh my gosh, you cannot.
Yeah.
And really, a lot of companies have made cutbacks and things like that, but that's one place they should not, especially at this time. I think it's really important to have EAPs, have other wellness programs. They're vital, and you want people to work to their best potential. They have to be their best selves, and mental health is part of that. It is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we tend to think that's kind of the soft side of management. It really is not.
No.
It's, and if you went back generations, you would understand things like how many people had drinking problems in the past.
Oh,
I'm going back to the 30s and the 40s when the workforce was dominated by one gender versus
yeah.
the
One
diversity
gender
we
and
see. And
race,
yeah,
really.
but
Yeah.
but the interesting thing is, because I worked a lot with EAPs and set one up in a company I worked for. The origins of an EAP started to address some of the systemic alcohol problems
That's
that organizations were seeing back in the 40s and the 50s. And it kind of grew from there.
wow. I'm
And
not surprised by that.
yeah,
That makes a
yeah,
lot of sense. And
yeah.
thank goodness we've continued to evolve from that too.
Yes,
Wonderful.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's true. And also, we talk, a lot of companies talk up their benefits for health, the health insurance they offer, the
Hmm.
medical care maybe they even offer, or, being able to go to the gym on the
Yeah,
company check. All that's wonderful, but it goes hand in hand with mental health, and your brain chemistry is part of your physical health. So,
yes, it is.
mm,
And another problem is employees and managers often don't understand what exists
it's
out there.
true.
They don't
Oh,
understand
no.
their benefits, and it's something that organizations have to constantly communicate. And we've got so many better communication channels these days, where we can keep in touch with our employees. I mean, it's not just hanging posters on the wall in the workplace anymore.
Yes, and that is one place I think AI could help. I think about all the time how complex it is when you're trying to figure out open enrollment, the benefits available to you, what the health insurance is going to do. I've said this many times. I've looked for jobs, and it's very hard for me. I have a disabled son, and that's kind of one of the main things. And the AI can simplify the complex and help you understand if that benefit is going to, be all right for you. So I think that's one place it could work.
And we had talked a little bit about the stress and where AI perhaps has made some progress and where it hasn't. Um, One of the things that we've seen, and I know we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit in the conversation, but there have been a lot of mixed signals coming from industry and the media. And and a lot of talk about, especially the executives in AI companies saying, oh, yeah, you can do all of this, you can cut staff, you can save money. Well, some of them, like OpenAI and Anthropic, are pedaling back on some of those
Yep.
projections as they are getting ready to go public. And it's like, oops, are we sending the wrong message out here? So that just adds to employees' stress because they just get that much more confused about what's going
Mhm. The
on.
confusion is high. I was going to bring this up in the next question, really, about how it's driving the anxiety. And that kind of has the opposite effect of what we're looking to do. It's
Mhm.
it's showing that the AI is not helping us be more productive. It's helping us stress out and not be as productive.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so I think part of that is just having to recognize that. Did you want to add anything about that?
I mean, I would say that, the one thing for companies and organizations to really keep in mind is if something's going on, be as honest as you can with your employees because they don't trust the silence, and that just gives rise to the rumor mills and everything else. So yes, there are times you can't be 100% honest in circumstances, that may involve, say, something like a competitor. You kind of need to keep things a little closer to the chest until the time is appropriate. And I've seen that with layoff situations that have had to been made, and um, you need to control it a little bit, but let people know what you can when you can,
Mhm.
and recognize that even if you have to address some of the rumors, um, be as honest and open as you can with people because they will really appreciate that.
And they'll know. Having come from having experienced this many
Yes.
times, either my own layoff or other people's layoffs or other big tumultuous events in a workplace, they know they're there every day. They see what's happening, so they know something's up. So it
Mhm.
it is very much appreciated and builds that trust and that strong community when people are honest. And you won't be burning any bridges even if it ends up that the person gets laid off. I've mentioned this before. I got laid off. I'm still talking to my previous managers and the people I worked with because we kind of knew what was coming a little bit. And
Mhm.
it was I don't want to say understandable because it always hits the heart, but you appreciated their transparency as much as they
Yes.
could, as much as they could.
Yes. Yeah.
So I do
Yeah.
agree with that. Um, so many employees are lacking confidence in AI's ability to understand the context of their work, and they're concerned that the organizations, aren't investing in the training of the machines, and they might not be maximizing the financial investment. That's creating stress as well. Any thoughts on that and when that might change? Do you have any inkling about that?
Yeah. I'm seeing a little bit of a sway, not a whole lot. Um, Adding to the stresses that people are seeing that yes, AI really doesn't understand what it is that we do as an organization.
Right.
They don't understand what my job is. What are the tasks that are going on? And, organizations have looked too much to focus on, how do we cut costs? How do we increase productivity? Well, we haven't seen the increase in productivity that they were expecting to see. In fact, the
Right.
St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank found that firms are investing and experimenting and reorganizing around AI, but they're also admitting that productivity effects remain mostly in the future.
Yeah,
It kind of gets to this, they're not they're not looking at it holistically, I guess is the best way to say it. A lot of money goes into it, and then it's not delivering. They're not training employees to the extent that they should be. In fact, another study I read recently is that employees, more than half employees are learning to use AI agents by trial and error, or they're going to YouTube to help. And how would we survive without YouTube
I
today?
know.
You know,
That's the truth.
yeah, and they're just pretty much figuring it out as they go along, and it's a shame because that's they're they're really not adding value to the organization. One company that did something better than most when we talk about replacing jobs, IKEA. They used AI to replace about 8,500 customer service roles, but they didn't lay anybody off.
Yep,
What they did is they created new jobs and they moved all of these 8,500 people into what they called interior design advisory roles. It was a whole new line of business and it's generated 1.4 billion in revenue for them. But what they found is back to, yeah, AI is good at doing certain things, a lot of the repetitive work,
that's great.
but humans are better at judgment. And in this case, they also found they're building relationships with the client, so they'll come back. They can exercise not just trust with the client, but if they're helping design something, they can bring good taste into it, not just, oh, well, this bookcase will fit over here. No, how about we get a different bookcase that looks a little bit nicer and fits in with the rest of your furniture that's in your house, or, something like that. So I thought that was very, very interesting
Yeah.
that they did that. And they invested the training dollars into it too to bring people, to bring this whole unit up. So
Mhm.
it can be done. It can be done.
It's true. We don't have to totally replace the human. You can figure out the best ways to use the AI and move the human to a different role because we can be taught too, just as the AI can be
Yeah,
taught, so can
yeah.
we, the people. I love that actually. That's a great example. So we're getting toward the end of our conversation. Our tagline is still Team Human. How can leaders and others keep this powerful message on the top of their minds in light of all that we're requiring of employees today?
I think if they realize some of the downsides of AI and then go back and say, how can we make it better? How can we focus on the future, um, and look at growth for the organization and for our employees like IKEA did, and focus the shift for us as an organization perhaps to new products and features
Mhm.
rather than just looking at where can we make cuts, where can we make cuts? Um, because the reality is what's happening with employees who are being forced to use AI. I'm going to use it that way. They're getting burned out. They're realizing they have to spend a lot of time checking because AI, what is it? They say it hallucinates from time to time. So you've got to check that out. They're having what they're called decision fatigue, and it's putting an increased cognitive load on your employees. So I think if you realize that and say, how do we turn AI into something positive to work for everybody, kind of like IKEA did, and say, where should we be focusing? Not just on cutting costs, because you may think you're cutting costs in one area, but you're adding them someplace else, like
Awesome.
in turnover, if you're dumping too much on employees. So I think if you really want to keep that human as somebody said, it's how about human intelligence instead of artificial intelligence? And I think that goes right into to your tagline about being still team human. Recognize the effect that AI is having on the individual employees or on employees as a whole, and take that step back and say, how can we get it to work with us,
Right.
with our employees, rather than against them?
Oh, yes. That's what we all want. And I think you make a good point saying how the AI is at this point is still making us do more work. It's not delivering on the promise of the productivity that we would all get to go spend more time with our family, get more vacation days. None of that has transpired yet because you have to do the oversight. I can tell you companies that have tried to write with AI, you have to go in and edit and re-edit, and it really defeats the purpose. It would have been better to just have a human do it from the beginning. I've said many times here, it's much better to just use it for outlines or to correct or improve a clever headline, something like that, and not at doing the writing. And that's the same for many, many jobs. So everyone should
Mhm.
keep that in mind. Um, did you have any final takeaways or messages you wanted to leave with the audience?
I think what I would leave people with is don't totally shy away from AI. The important thing is to understand how it works.
Yes,
Too many people are just too negative about it, but they don't even know what their negative where that negativity lies. They don't understand how AI can be a resource. Um, so learn a little bit more about it. And take that time, and then I think you'll be able to find a good balance between how can it help me and where are some of the places where even if it's not so much a hindrance, but it's really not going to move along where I'm trying to get to. Uh, those are the thoughts I'd leave people with.
I love that. That's the perfect place. And how can people reach you and Barbara if they want to get in touch?
Both Barbara Mitchell and I have a strong presence on LinkedIn, so we would love for you to reach out to us and to connect with us. We also have a website, www.bigbookofhr, all one word.com. Um, you can find a lot of information about both us and our books, and we write a weekly blog, so you have access to that. And sign up for, we have a newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter directly on the website. We'd love to hear from everybody.
Oh, and go read the books, everyone. Cornelia, it's been
Thank
such
you.
a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank
And
you.
we will, I'm sure, talk again very soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.